Is it just me? Or is the water too cold?
Lindsay, the office secretary, looked up from behind her PC. "What's going on?" "Nothing," said Ken. "Nothing?" Jim exclaimed. "That's the couple what bought that Poachers Cottage place off you last year." Ken looked up and shrugged. "So?" "So?" Jim snorted in disbelief. "They're dead, Ken." Lindsay's hands went to her mouth. "Oh my God. What happened?" "Says here they committed suicide," said Ken. "Nothing remarkable about that." "Oh, come on, Ken," said Jim. "That cottage? You remember the stories about that place, don't you? The other people, the dead people, the ghosts." "Ghosts?" said Lindsay. "What ghosts? What dead people?" "Ah, it's just a load of bollocks, Linz," said Ken, tossing the paper into his out tray. "Jim's just getting all excited over nothing." Jim shook his head, taking the paper and passing it across the office to Lindsay. "Oh, I don't think so, Ken. It's exactly like what we were saying in a pub last year when this place first came on the market, about what if the new owners went and died. Well, here they are, dead." "Oh, don't get hysterical, Jim," said Ken wearily. "It's first thing Monday morning. I've got about 1,000,000 things to do before midday, and so have you. Why don't you just make a cup of tea and settle down with the Wellington Street sale? In fact, you can make us all a cup of tea. Right, Lindsay?" "What dead people are you going on about?" said Lindsay, turning through the pages of the newspaper. "Page 7, said Jim. He came around alongside her and pointed to the article. "Here, see? There's a picture of 'em." "Oh, yeah," said Lindsay, seeing the picture in the headline. "Couple in gas suicide pact." "Yeah," said Jim. "See that cottage? The one they're standing in front of in the picture? We sold 'em that place a year ago. It's a haunted house." "Bollocks," said Ken. "Oh," said Lindsay, reading the article. "And now they're dead. How dreadful. Didn't it bother them, the fact that it was haunted?" "They didn't know," said Jim. "We neglected to tell them." Lindsay looked up over the newspaper. "You didn't tell them? You kept something like that a secret?" "Of course we did," said Ken, pushing his seat back and getting to his feet. "You don't go around advertising every cock and bull story that's muttered about a place in the local boozer, do you? Jesus Christ! Every house has a history. This very office is probably standing on land that's had some blood spilt on it at some stage in history." "Is it?" Lindsay asked, suddenly looking worried. "I don't know," said Ken. "But why not? Maybe there was a battle here once. Romans, Vikings, Normans, Roundheads. Think about it. There have been battles, murders and executions all over this country. But you don't see ghosts everywhere, do you?" "Well, no," said Jim. But bollocks," said Ken. "There are no more ghosts in Poachers Cottage than there are in your house." "Still," said Lindsay, "you might have told them. I mean, how couldn't you?" Ken threw up his hands in a gesture of hopeless defeat. I don't know what to tell you." He shook his head. "It's business, for God's sake." Lindsay had returned to the story. "It says here that the husband, Mr. Evan Collier, I remember that name, it says here that he and his wife Rachel gassed themselves." She made a face. "Oh my God. They were found in each other's arms in the kitchen. The oven door was open and the room was filled with gas. No suicide note has been found, but police are not treating their deaths as suspicious." She lowered the paper. So they just sat in the kitchen together and gassed themselves. Ooh. Oh, that's horrible. Why would they do such a thing? Yeah, and no note either, said Jim, eyeing Ken knowingly. It's funny, you know. It never seemed suicidal to me. What about you, Ken? Why are you asking me? Do I look like a psychiatrist? I'm just saying it doesn't sound like suicide to me. That's all. Oh, so what does it sound like to you then, Sherlock? Said Ken. Well, I don't know, said Jim. I just remember you saying about that old lady who died of hypothermia in May. And that couple in the war who suffocated in their air raid shelter. And this leads you to conclude what? Ken interrupted. That the poacher's ghost sat the pair of them down and stood guard over them with his shotgun, while his phantom wife and her lover locked all the doors and windows and turned the gas on? You shouldn't speak ill of the dead. It's not nice, especially when they died as awfully as these poor people did. I'm only saying what Sherlock Deacon here thinks. Isn't that right, mate? I didn't say anything about poachers and shotguns, said Jim. I said I don't know. He went over to his desk and sat down. I just think it's all a bit creepy, that's all. So it's a bit creepy. But don't get things out of proportion, mate. It's a coincidence, that's all. Sure, said Jim, leafing through some papers on his desk and not looking up. It's just a coincidence. Good, said Ken, rubbing his hands as if he were washing them clean of the subject. Now then, who wants a nice cup of tea, eh? I'll make it. Are you sure you remember how to? Said Lindsay. Less of the cheek, Linz, said Ken. Do you want a cup or not? I won't offer twice. Yes, please. Jim? Jim looked up from his papers and nodded. Yeah, thanks. Right then, said Ken. So, how does everybody take it? No sugar for me, said Lindsay. And, I'll take one, said Jim. Okay, said Ken, disappearing through the rear office door in the direction of the kitchen. Excellent. 3 cups of tea coming up. It was later that day when the call from Canada came. Lindsay picked up the receiver and spoke in the bright and cheerful manner that Ken insisted they use when answering the phone. Ken Chase Properties, how may I help you? For a moment, all she could hear was a quiet hiss on the line and a number of faint clicking sounds, as if the call were being routed through a series of switchboards. Then a voice came through. It sounded distant, unclear.
Could I speak with Mr. Chase, please?
Sorry, said Lindsay. Could you speak up, please? It's rather a bad line.
I'm calling long distance,
said the caller, raising his voice a little.
I'd like to speak to Mr. Chase, if he's available.
Lindsay looked over at Ken, who sat playing solitaire on his PC. One moment, please. Can I ask who's calling?
My name's Collier. Richard Collier. It's concerning the sale of my late brother's house.
Lindsay's breath caught in her chest for a second. Then she said, could you just hold on a moment, please, Mr. Collier? She put Collier on hold and called over to Ken. Ken, it's the brother of that poor dead man on the phone. Ken frowned. Eh? What poor dead man? That suicide couple in the paper. It's that man's brother. He's in Canada. Jim's face suddenly appeared over his computer monitor. Collier? Lindsay nodded. Jim looked at Ken. Ken beckoned to Lindsay with his hand, as if summoning Collier in person. Put him through, Lindsay transferred the call and put the receiver down. Ken's phone rang, and he picked it up. "Hello, Ken Chase speaking. Can I help you?"
Mr. Chase, my name is Richard Collier. I'm calling regarding the property of my late brother.
"Oh, Mr. Collier. We were just reading in the local paper about your brother's tragic passing. May I just say how sorry we all are here for your loss?"
Thank you, Mr. Chase. I'm in Canada at the moment, but I'll be over to England shortly to arrange my brother's funeral, in conjunction with the family of my late sister-in-law.
Yes, of course," said Ken.
I'll also be handling the closure of my brother's various interests and affairs, including the sale of his house.